I was afraid to show my ignorance, so I didn't ask.
Hollywood celebrated them as legends. America's greatest cowboy, the king of the silver screen, the man who built children's dreams. But behind the cameras, one actor after another forced Sidney Poitier to navigate an industry shaped by racism, segregation, and powerful figures determined to keep Hollywood exactly as it was.
And any man that doesn't want to cooperate, I'll make him wish he hadn't been born.
In this countdown, you'll discover why John Wayne publicly declared his belief in white supremacy, how Walt Disney's films shaped generations with racial stereotypes, why Clark Gable became linked to Hollywood's romanticized image of the Old South, and how Sidney Poitier still became the first black man to win the Academy Award for Best Actor, despite every obstacle placed in his path. Every story in this video is based on documented interviews, published biographies, archived newspapers, studio records, and historical evidence, not internet myths or tabloid gossip.
You owed me everything you could ever do for me, like I will owe my son if I ever have another.
And wait until you reach number one, because what John Wayne said about black Americans after Poitier had already become Hollywood's biggest star remains one of the most controversial statements ever made by a screen legend. Let's get into it.
Go. Shut up, shut up. You're talking to a doctor.
A doctor? Him?
Sidney Poitier arrived in Hollywood in 1950 as something the industry had never seen before: a black leading man. Not a black actor playing a supporting role, not a black performer taking parts Hollywood deemed acceptable for black performers. A man who would carry films as the protagonist, the hero, the presence audiences paid to see. His introduction to cinema came through a film called No Way Out. He played Dr. Luther Brooks, a recently qualified black physician working at a county hospital. On his first day as a leading man in American cinema, on his very first take, he was forced to stand opposite Richard Widmark, a white actor playing Ray Bidd, a violent criminal who would spend the entire film screaming racial slurs directly into Poitier's face. Take after take after take. Widmark had built his entire early career on playing racist villains. His breakout role in Kiss of Death in 1947 established him as the face of menacing white hatred. He brought a particular intensity to racial violence, a conviction that colleagues noted felt personal. When he brought that same energy to No Way Out, he performed white racial hatred with a ferocity that exceeded what the script required. The British Film Institute documented that Poitier's on-screen anger was palpably genuine. It wasn't acting. It was a 23-year-old black man from the Bahamas being screamed at with the worst language America had to offer under hot studio lights, with cameras rolling and being told to do the scene again. This matters because of what happened next. Widmark transitioned to heroic roles. His early career playing racist villains became celebrated as range, as versatility, as proof that he was a skilled performer who could play any role convincingly. No Way Out was treated as a minor early work in both their careers, rather than a film where a young black actor endured sustained racial abuse on his first day, in an industry that would become his life's work. Widmark's racist characters became entertaining for audiences. They became profitable for studios. Hollywood reframed it as a sign of his talent. Poitier's genuine anguish in those scenes was absorbed into the performance and never acknowledged as the real pain of a real man being dehumanized. That pattern would repeat 7 times across his career. Number 7. Richard Widmark. The power in No Way Out belonged to Widmark. He controlled the dialogue. He controlled the intensity. Poitier's job was to react, to stand there, to absorb the verbal violence and deliver a performance so powerful that the film's anger felt authentic. The industry would later note the authenticity of Poitier's rage. They never examined why that rage felt authentic. A man doesn't perform that kind of fury, he survives it. He channels the genuine trauma of the moment into the character and calls it a performance. Widmark spent the early years of his career perfecting the visual language of American racism. He made it compelling cinema. He made it entertaining. He made white audiences comfortable watching their own hatred reflected back at them through art. And for that, he received recognition. He received roles. He received career advancement. Poitier received trauma on his first day in the industry. What makes this particularly significant is that this encounter established the pattern Poitier would be forced to navigate for decades. He was surrounded by white co-stars, white directors, and white studio executives, many of whom held racist views. He had to prove his talent, not just as an actor, but as a human being worthy of sharing the frame with white actors. He had to deliver performances so powerful that audiences would have to confront their own biases. He couldn't simply act. He had to survive. If you're wondering how Hollywood justified forcing a young black actor to endure this kind of treatment, the answer reveals how systematically the industry protected racism while celebrating the art created in spite of it. The next name ran the studio that produced two of Poitier's most important films and poisoned everything inside it. Number 6. Harry Cohn. Harry Cohn ran Columbia Pictures. He was the most feared and hated man in Hollywood. His cruelty was legendary. At his funeral in 1958, the enormous turnout prompted a famous observation: "It proves you give the people what they want." What he gave people was power over everyone else's livelihood. Columbia Pictures produced two of the most important films about black life ever made, Porgy and Bess in 1959 and A Raisin in the Sun in 1961. Both featured Sidney Poitier. Both required him to deliver performances of extraordinary dignity. Both were created inside an institution poisoned by its own leader. Cohn used racial slurs as casually as breathing, not in private, in public, as displays of dominance. He directed these slurs at performers, at staff members, at colleagues, reminding everyone who controlled their livelihood. His absolute power meant nobody could challenge him without destroying their career. He treated minority employees with open contempt. Racist language was so constant and casual that it became the atmosphere of Columbia Pictures itself. It became the water everyone breathed. Cohn's control over casting decisions kept black performers locked in subservient roles for decades. He wielded that power as a mechanism of control. He understood that representation was power, and he controlled every black image that Columbia produced. Yet somehow, inside this machine of racism, Poitier created performances of grace, performances of dignity, performances that would become landmarks in cinema. The industry told stories about Cohn's viciousness as colorful anecdotes: the monster who ran a studio, the man whose cruelty was so indiscriminate that it became acceptable. Hollywood argued he was terrible to everyone, as if equal opportunity cruelty excused targeted racial abuse. That logic allowed the racism to persist while the output was celebrated. Poitier created art inside institutional racism. He proved that it was possible to maintain dignity inside an institution designed to destroy it. That achievement has never been properly acknowledged. Nobody speaks about the irony that some of Poitier's most celebrated work was created under the leadership of a man who saw him as less than human. Number 5. Walt Disney. This is where Poitier's battle stopped being fair. Every child who walked into a theater to see In the Heat of the Night or Guess Who's Coming to Dinner had already been to Disneyland. They had already watched Dumbo. They had already absorbed Song of the South. Before Sidney Poitier could show America what a black man could be, Walt Disney had already shown America's children what he thought black people were. Disney documented in studio communications referred to black child performers as pickaninnies. His 1946 film, Song of the South, presented a romanticized post-Civil War plantation where Uncle Remus sings about the wonderful day it is, while conditions barely distinguish from slavery. The crows in Dumbo in 1941 included one literally named Jim Crow. The Siamese cats in Lady and the Tramp in 1955. King Louis in The Jungle Book in 1967, released the same year as Poitier's 3 landmark films. Each animation embedded racial stereotypes into the imaginations of children too young to recognize what they were absorbing. Disney built a delivery system for racism that reached generations before they could think critically about what they were seeing. He planted images in their minds that Poitier would spend a lifetime trying to uproot. Disney didn't just create entertainment. He co-founded the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, the organization that maintained the very system Poitier fought against his entire career. This was institutional racism operating on multiple levels. Disney shaped culture. Disney shaped children's understanding of race. Disney protected the system that required people like Poitier to prove their humanity. The cover-up was institutional and total. Song of the South was eventually locked in the vault, refused home video release in the United States. Splash Mountain was not reimagined until 2023. No formal apology was ever issued. Disney's name remains on studios and theme parks across the world without meaningful reckoning with what he built. Poitier could change the minds of adults who watched his films. He could reach audiences capable of shifting their perception of black men through cinema, but he could never reach the children Disney had already gotten to first. The battle was rigged before it started. By the time Poitier's films reached audiences, those audiences had already absorbed decades of Disney's racial mythology. Number 4. Clark Gable. In 1957, Sidney Poitier co-starred with Clark Gable in Band of Angels. Gable played a slave owner, Poitier played a rebellious overseer. The most important black actor of his generation was forced to share the screen with the man whose most famous role had romanticized the institution that enslaved his ancestors. Gable was Rhett Butler, the charming rogue of the slave-holding South, the romantic hero of Gone with the Wind, the highest-grossing film in history adjusted for inflation. That film premiered in 1939 and presented slavery as a gracious institution where enslaved people were happy, loyal, and devoted to their masters. Hattie McDaniel played Mammy, the ultimate stereotype. The film romanticized the Confederacy. It portrayed Reconstruction as a disaster. It sold a fantasy of slavery to hundreds of millions worldwide. At the Atlanta premiere, the entire black cast, including McDaniel, was banned from attending because Georgia's Jim Crow laws forbade integrated gatherings. Gable reportedly threatened to boycott, but was talked out of it by the studio. He went anyway. When McDaniel won the Oscar, the first black person ever to win, she was seated at a segregated table at the back of the ceremony while Gable sat in the front. The mythology was protected for over 85 years. Gone with the Wind was re-released repeatedly, celebrated on every anniversary, treated as untouchable. The plantation fantasy it sold shaped how hundreds of millions understood American slavery as romantic, as tragic, as fundamentally acceptable within a certain social structure. When Poitier stood opposite Gable in Band of Angels, he was sharing the screen with the man who had done more to romanticize slavery than any other performer in history. The industry that arranged that pairing never acknowledged what it was asking Poitier to endure. It was asking him to stand next to the physical embodiment of the mythology he was trying to dismantle. It was asking him to deliver a performance of dignity while playing a man in bondage to the face of the plantation. Number 3. Spencer Tracy. In 1967, Sidney Poitier co-starred with Spencer Tracy in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Tracy played Matt Drayson, a liberal white father confronting his own biases when his daughter brings home a black fiancé, played by Poitier. It was Tracy's final film. He died 17 days after filming Wrapped. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner became Hollywood's most direct statement about interracial acceptance. The film argued for tolerance. It argued for seeing past racial prejudice. It portrayed a white father learning to accept his daughter's black fiancé. It was celebrated as a landmark of racial progress. Poitier's performance was quiet dignity opposite a man playing a liberal awakening. Behind closed doors, Spencer Tracy used the very language the film was arguing against. Tracy was considered the greatest actor of his generation. 2 consecutive Academy Awards, a feat never matched. His alcoholism was legendary. He disappeared on benders. He shut down productions. He became hostile when intoxicated. Among Hollywood insiders, Tracy was known for using racial slurs in private during these episodes. His talent and his temper created a force field that deflected all scrutiny. Nobody dared challenge Spencer Tracy about anything, not about the affair with Hepburn that everyone knew about, certainly not about what he said when he was drinking. The film itself became the cover-up. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is celebrated as a landmark of racial progress. Tracy's performance as the father who ultimately accepts his daughter's black fiancé became the defining image of his legacy. A film about overcoming prejudice, starring a man who harbored prejudice in private. Poitier had to sit through press tours promoting a film about racial tolerance alongside a co-star whose private language contradicted every word of the script. The ultimate Hollywood hypocrisy was committed on camera, and nobody ever called it what it was. Tracy played the liberal on screen and contradicted it behind closed doors. The industry protected him because his on-screen image was too valuable. Number 2, John Ford. While Sidney Poitier spent the 1950s and 1960s building the most dignified images of black humanity cinema had ever seen, John Ford was still making westerns that portrayed non-white people as savages, as obstacles, as targets. They worked in the same industry at the same time. They constructed opposite visions of what minorities could be on screen. Ford dehumanized, Poitier elevated. Ford won 4 Best Director Oscars for his vision. Poitier won 1 Best Actor Oscar, fighting against everything Ford's legacy represented. The industry rewarded Ford's dehumanization 4 times more than Poitier's dignity. Ford directed dozens of westerns across 4 decades. He portrayed Native Americans and minorities as violent, primitive, and subhuman. He established the visual template every western followed: the circling wagon train, the war-painted savages, the cavalry riding to the rescue as the heroes. He used white actors in redface to play native characters. He built the mythology of the American West on the dehumanization of indigenous people, packaging genocide as adventure. His films didn't reflect existing racism, they manufactured it. They created a visual language of minority inferiority absorbed by hundreds of millions across generations. That language became how America understood the West. It became how America understood indigenous people. It became the foundational mythology of American identity. The cover-up is the industry itself. 4 Academy Awards for Best Director, more than any filmmaker in history. The American Film Institute ranked him the greatest American director of all time. The Searchers is studied and revered in every film school on earth without meaningful reckoning with its portrayal of minorities. Film students spend years analyzing Ford's technical mastery without examining the ideological framework his mastery was constructed to serve. Poitier was building one future for non-white people on screen, while Ford's legacy cemented a completely different one. The industry celebrated Ford's vision far more lavishly than Poitier's. That ratio tells you everything about where Hollywood's values actually were. Ford built the mythology, Hollywood rewarded him with 4 Oscars. Poitier built dignity, Hollywood gave him a moment that would eventually be buried. Number 1. John Wayne. By 1971, Sidney Poitier had done everything a human being could possibly do to prove himself. He had won an Academy Award. He had been the number 1 box office star in all of Hollywood. He had starred in 3 simultaneous number 1 films. He had marched with Martin Luther King Jr. He had nearly been killed by the Ku Klux Klan in Mississippi. He had refused demeaning roles and chosen dignity every single time at the cost of roles he wanted and opportunities he lost. He had changed how an entire nation saw black men. He had carried the weight of an entire race's representation on his shoulders for over a decade without breaking, and none of it mattered. In 1971, John Wayne sat down with Playboy magazine and declared that he believed in white supremacy. He said black people needed to be educated to a point of responsibility before they deserved equality. He was talking about Sidney Poitier, a man who had risked his life for equality while Wayne made war movies on studio lots. A man who had won the industry's highest honor while Wayne played cowboys. A man who had demonstrated courage and sacrifice while Wayne built a career on playing warriors without ever being one. Wayne looked at Poitier's entire body of work, every film, every march, every sacrifice, and said it wasn't enough. That black people hadn't yet earned the right to be treated as equals. That there was still a threshold to cross before Poitier deserved basic human dignity. On Native Americans, Wayne stated he did not feel America did wrong in taking the country. He called it a matter of survival. He served as president of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, the same organization that maintained the very system Poitier fought against his entire career. Wayne wasn't separate from the system. He was the system personified. Hollywood chose Wayne over Poitier, despite those words published in a major national magazine and read by millions. Wayne's career continued without interruption. No boycotts, no consequences, no studio severed ties. Hollywood continued celebrating him as the face of American values. The man who had actually demonstrated American values through courage and sacrifice was told he hadn't done enough. The man who declared white supremacy in print was treated as a patriot. When a California legislature voted against declaring a John Wayne Day, many reacted with shock as though the interview never existed. In 2019, when activists called for his name to be removed from John Wayne Airport, The controversy proved how thoroughly Hollywood had buried one of the most explicitly racist statements any star ever made on record. That statement exists. That magazine exists. That interview is documented. Yet somehow it became footnote, anecdote, water under the bridge. Wayne proved something Poitier spent his career refusing to accept, even when black men did everything right, even when they proved their talent, their dignity, their courage, their worth. For some people, it would never be enough. No achievement would change the fundamental belief. No Oscar would matter. No box office record would register. Nothing Poitier could do would make him acceptable to men like John Wayne. Sidney Poitier couldn't walk away. If he left, there was no one to take his place, so he stayed. He was screamed at with slurs on his first day in Hollywood and turned the pain into art. He worked inside studios poisoned by racist leadership and created beauty within the ugliness. He was taught to children as a stereotype by Disney before he could ever reach them himself. He stood opposite the face of plantation mythology and answered with dignity. He sat across from co-stars who used slurs in private while filming movies about tolerance. He watched the industry reward the dehumanization of minorities 4 times more generously than it rewarded his dignity. And he was told by the biggest cowboy star alive that none of it, not the Oscar, not the box office records, not the marches, not the near death in Mississippi, was enough to earn the right to be treated as an equal. These 7 stars were protected by the most powerful system ever built. But Poitier outlasted them all. He didn't just survive Hollywood, he changed it. He proved that black men could carry films. He proved that black men could be heroes on screen. He proved that dignity was possible inside an industry designed to destroy it. He didn't win by becoming white. He didn't win by compromising. He won by being undeniably, irreplaceably excellent. This is the version of Hollywood history that matters, not the sanitized version of progress, but the documented cost of every step forward. If this video opened your eyes to the names behind the scenes and the system that protected them, like this video and subscribe to the channel for more untold stories from Golden Age Hollywood. Every week, we uncover the documented truth about the figures who shaped cinema and the people who survived them. Before you go, consider this. How many other figures in entertainment history have we celebrated without examining what they actually believed? What systems are we still protecting by treating racism as isolated incidents rather than industry-wide machinery? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.